Yorkshire does dry stone walls and sheep on hillsides rather well. Limestone pavements, tea rooms in market towns, walking country so thoroughly mapped that every style has a waymark. But Yorkshire has another register, one the guidebooks photograph from a safe distance. These are not haunted houses or ruined abbeys. These are natural places. Gorges, caves, rivers, bogs and bare rock. 15 places where the geology, the weather and centuries of accumulated experience converge to produce something the rational mind does not fully resolve. Places where locals will tell you, quietly and without drama, not to go. We begin in Wharfdale, in a gorge that most walkers pass without entering. Trollers Gill sits above the village of Appletreewick in the Yorkshire Dales, a narrow limestone ravine roughly 400 metres long, carved by glacial meltwater at the end of the last ice age. The walls rise to 20 metres on either side. The floor is loose scree and standing water. On a bright afternoon, it is a geological curiosity. On a grey afternoon in November, it is something else entirely. The gill is associated with the Barghest, a spectral black dog documented in Yorkshire folklore since at least the 17th century. Richard Blakeborough recorded the tradition in Wit, Character, Folklore and Customs of the North Riding of Yorkshire, published in 1898. The Barghest appears at crossroads, in churchyards, and at the mouths of narrow places. Trollers Gill is its most persistent address. The name itself may derive from the Scandinavian word for troll. Walkers on the UK Hill Walking Forum describe acoustic effects inside the gorge that have nothing to do with folklore and everything to do with limestone. Footsteps amplify. Wind funnels through the narrow channel and produces a low droning that sits just below the frequency the ear identifies as sound. You feel it in the sternum before you hear it. Natural England designated the gill as a site of special scientific interest for its geology. The designation says nothing about the sound. 6 miles east of Whitby, the coast drops into a narrow inlet between Robin Hood's Bay and Ravenscar. Boggle Hole takes its name from the Yorkshire dialect word for a mischievous or malevolent spirit. Joseph Wright documented the term in his English Dialect Dictionary, published between 1898 and 1905. The cove was a smuggler's landing from the 17th century onward. Contraband was carried up the cliffs and into the network of passages beneath the village above. AYHA Youth Hostel now occupies the old mill building at the base of the inlet. The Jurassic cliffs here are losing ground. British Geological Survey data records average retreat rates along this stretch of coast at between 5 and 10 centimetres per year, with periodic larger collapses. The beach at Boggle Hole is accessible only by foot along the Cleveland Way, or down a steep track from the road. At high tide, the path from Robin Hood's Bay becomes impassable. You are cut off. Staff at the youth hostel and visitors posting on TripAdvisor and walking forums describe the cove after dark in remarkably consistent terms. The sound of the sea changes when it enters a confined space. Waves hit rock on 3 sides, and the echo folds back on itself. One reviewer noted that they had stayed at coastal hostels across Britain, and Boggle Hole was the only one where they checked the tide table before going to sleep. We move inland now and upward. Gordale Scar opens without warning from a flat meadow east of Malham. A limestone ravine 100 metres deep, overhanging cliffs, a tufa waterfall pouring over a rock step that walkers must scramble to pass. The painter James Ward spent months attempting to capture it on canvas. His 1812 painting, roughly 330 by 400 centimetres, hangs in Tate Britain. He later admitted that he had exaggerated the scale because the real thing was too large to render accurately and too oppressive to look at for long. Thomas Gray visited in 1769 and described the scar in his journal in terms closer to terror than admiration. William Wordsworth came in 1818 and wrote a sonnet about it. Neither man suggested it was pleasant. The Scar is a site of special scientific interest and a special area of conservation. It receives over 100,000 visitors a year. Most of them stand at the base and look up. The walls lean inward. In heavy rain, the waterfall doubles in volume, and the spray fills the ravine like smoke. Walking groups on Yorkshire forums describe the acoustics as disorienting. Sound bounces between the walls and arrives from directions that do not correspond to its source. You hear your own footsteps a half-second after you take them, as though someone behind you is matching your pace. Now the register changes. We have been dealing with folklore and geology. What follows is documented lethality in a setting that looks like a Sunday afternoon walk. The River Wharf at Bolton Abbey passes through a stretch called the Strid. For most of its course through the estate, the river is wide and unhurried. Then the banks close in. The full volume of the wharf is forced into a channel roughly 2 meters across. The surface looks calm. A confident stride could carry you from one bank to the other. Some people have tried. The survival rate, by every account available, is 0. Beneath the surface, the river has spent millennia carving undercut ledges, submerged caves, and hydraulic features that pull anything entering the water downward and hold it there. The depth is unknown. Dye tests conducted by cavers have failed to establish the full extent of the submerged passage network. The medieval legend of the Boy of Egremond, son of Alistair Romilly, places his drowning here in the 12th century. William Whitaker recorded the story in his History of the Deanery of Craven. The Bradford Telegraph and Argus and the Yorkshire Post have reported fatalities at the Strid across the 20th and 21st centuries. The Bolton Abbey estate maintains warning signs. The signs are explicit. Visitors still approach the edge. They look down at water that appears shallow and crossable, and their brain tells them they could make it. Their brain is wrong. The Strid is the distance between what you see and what is actually there. That distance is fatal. On Brimham Moor above Nidderdale, 50 acres of millstone grit stand in formations that no architect would approve. Balanced rocks the size of houses resting on pedestals the width of a dinner plate. Mushroom pillars, overhangs that appear to defy gravity. The National Trust manages the site. Over 320 million years of wind, rain and frost have produced shapes with names like the Idol, the Dancing Bear and the Druid's Writing Desk. The Druidic Association is largely Victorian invention. The geology needs no embellishment. Brimham sits at roughly 300 metres on open moorland. In clear weather, the views extend to the Vale of York. In mist, the rocks become something else. Paths loop between the formations and landmarks look different from every angle. Walking Forum contributors describe the specific experience of walking at Brimham in low cloud and finding themselves back where they started without having consciously turned. North Yorkshire Police have attended call-outs from visitors disoriented on the moor after dark. The rocks do not move, but your sense of where you are among them does. We descend now, into the earth. Above the village of Sellside in Ribblesdale, a field of rough pasture contains a hole. Alum Pot is a vertical open shaft roughly 60 metres deep. You approach it on foot across grass and the ground simply ends. A dry stone wall marks the perimeter, but in places it has collapsed. Water from a small stream pours over the lip and falls as a waterfall into the darkness below. The cave system it feeds extends for several kilometres underground, connecting to passages that the Council of Northern Caving Clubs has documented over decades. The Cave Rescue Organisation, based at Clapham, holds records of incidents at Alum Pot stretching back generations. Farmers whose fields adjoin the shaft have lost livestock to it. There is no fence adequate to the problem. The hole is in the ground. It does not explain itself. It does not need to. On the North York Moors, near the old Saltergate Road, the land opens into a bowl. The Hole of Horcum is a natural amphitheatre roughly 400 metres across and 120 metres deep. Local legend attributes it to the giant Wade, who scooped out a handful of earth to throw at his wife and created both the hole and Blakey topping from the discarded material. The geological explanation is spring-sapping erosion, millennia of groundwater undermining the hillside from within. The North York Moors National Park Authority manages the site. RAF Fylingdales is visible from the rim, its pyramid replaced now by the solid state-phased array, still scanning for inbound missiles as it has done since 1963. Standing at the edge of the Hole of Horcum with a Cold War early warning station at your back produces a particular kind of unease that has nothing to do with giants. Sound carries across the bowl in ways that make voices impossible to locate. In low cloud, the rim disappears and walkers lose their sense of position relative to the edge. Contributors on Walk Highlands describe the experience of hearing laughter from inside the hole with no visible source. Sound arrives from the bowl, and you cannot tell how far away it is, or how far down. Beneath the western flank of Ingleborough, White Scar Cave extends for over a kilometre into the mountain. It is the longest show cave in Britain. Passages up to 100,000 years old. The battlefield chamber alone stretches 100 metres. Stalactites that have been growing since before humans reached these islands. The show cave is lit and guided. Beyond the tourist route, the passages continue into the wider Three Counties system, one of the longest cave networks in Britain, where the ceiling drops, the water rises, and the darkness has never been interrupted by light of any kind. Show cave visitors describe one particular moment. During demonstrations, the guides extinguish all artificial light. The darkness that arrives is not the darkness of a room with the curtains drawn. It is absolute. It has weight. Your eyes do not adjust because there is nothing to adjust to. One visitor posting on a caving forum wrote that they had experienced darkness in many forms, but the darkness inside a Yorkshire cave was the only kind that felt like a substance. Something you could reach out and touch. Something that was already touching you. The ground rises again. Pen-y-ghent is the smallest of the Yorkshire Three Peaks at 694 metres, but its approaches are the most treacherous. The peat bogs on the southern flanks, between Alum Pot and Hunt Pot, are saturated ground that in places will not support a person's weight. The peat is centuries of compressed vegetation. When it is wet, which in this part of England means most of the year, it behaves like a fluid with a skin. The Cave Rescue Organisation and the Yorkshire Dales Mountain Rescue Team between them log significant call-out numbers for Pen-y-ghent annually. A substantial proportion occur when cloud descends to the summit plateau and visibility drops to single figures. The peat groughs, deep channels cut into the blanket bog by water erosion, are head height in places. Walk into one in mist, and your horizon shrinks to the walls of peat on either side. You cannot see the path. You cannot see the summit. You cannot see anything that tells you which direction you are travelling. Met Office data for the Northern Pennines records cloud base below 600 metres on roughly 150 days per year. Pen-y-ghent summit sits inside that cloud for nearly half the year. We move now into different country. Not folklore or documented danger, but places where the land holds something it will not explain. Hardcastle Crags is a wooded valley near Hebden Bridge in Calderdale. Roughly 160 acres of woodland managed by the National Trust, following Hebden Water through a narrow clough. Gibson Mill sits at the centre. A former cotton mill built around 1800, now powered entirely off-grid. Above the canopy, dark gritstone crags give the valley its name. In winter, the trees are bare, but the valley floor remains in permanent shadow. The sun does not reach the bottom between November and February. Walking groups on Gordale forums describe the valley's acoustic properties with a consistency that suggests they are not imagining it. Hebden water produces constant background noise, not loud, just present enough to mask other sounds. Footsteps on the path behind you are inaudible until the person is close enough to touch. Your peripheral awareness narrows. One contributor wrote that they had walked the valley dozens of times in daylight and found it charming. They walked it once at dusk in January and did not return after dark again. The woods are not haunted. They are simply very good at concealing what is inside them. The Buttertubs Pass climbs to over 500 metres between Thwaite in Swaledale and Hawes in Wensleydale. The road is narrow, the gradient is severe, and immediately beside the tarmac, with no barrier beyond a low stone marker in places, a series of limestone sinkholes drop vertically to over 20 metres. The fluted shafts were formed by rainwater dissolving the rock along joint plains over millennia. The name comes from the tradition that farmers crossing the pass would lower their butter into the holes to keep it cool during the journey. The Yorkshire Geological Society has documented the formation process. North Yorkshire County Council road safety data records the pass as an above-average risk route for its classification. When the Tour de France visited in 2014, cycling commentators described the Buttertubs as the most visually dramatic roadside hazard on the entire British route. In fog, the road edge and the sinkholes become indistinguishable. You know the holes are there. You know they are deep. You cannot see where the tarmac ends and the void begins. Roseberry Topping rises to 320 metres near Great Ayton on the edge of the North York Moors. Its jagged profile is visible from miles in every direction. But Roseberry Topping did not always look like this. Before 1812, it was a rounded summit. In that year, the south face collapsed. Alum and ironstone mining had hollowed the hill from within, documented in Cleveland ironstone mining records, and the weight of the cap rock became unsupportable. The hillside sheared away. The profile that walkers see today is the scar of an industrial wound that the land has carried for over 2 centuries. The name derives from the Old Norse Othanisberg, the Hill of Odin. Captain James Cook grew up in Great Ayton and is documented as having walked its slopes as a boy. Standing on the summit, you can see the chemical works of Teesside to the north and the moors rolling south toward Whitby. Contributors on local walking forums describe a quality that photographs do not capture. The hill looks injured. One side smooth and grassed, the other shattered. It is a landscape that remembers what was done to it and has not finished settling. At 375 metres above sea level, Malham Tarn is the highest marl lake in England, glacial in origin. Sitting on an impermeable shelf of Silurian slate, while the carboniferous limestone around it drains freely. The water is dark. The surrounding raised bog is acidic, saturated, and in places will not support a person standing still. Charles Kingsley stayed at Tarn House in 1858. The dark water and the strange quality of the bog are widely credited as the inspiration for the water babies. The Field Studies Council operates a research station at Tarn House. Natural England designates the Tarn and its surrounds as both a site of special scientific interest and a national nature reserve. In winter, the road from Malham village is frequently impassable. The Tarn sits in a shallow depression with no settlement visible in any direction. At dusk, the surface of the water goes black. The bog becomes featureless. Birdwatchers on Yorkshire forums describe the specific silence of Malham Tarn in winter as something beyond quiet. It is an active absence, the kind of silence your ears search for a source in and find nothing. One contributor wrote that they had birdwatched across Britain for 30 years, and Malham Tarn at dusk in December was the only place where the silence made them pack up early. We end where Yorkshire is deepest. Not in a gorge or a cave or a valley, but on the open moor above Upper Swaledale, walked at night. This is not about folklore. There is no Barghest here, no giant, no legend. This is about what happens when you walk Blanket Bog alone in darkness. The ground is saturated peat. Tussock grass catches your boots at every step. The path, where it exists, is a suggestion rather than a surface. Cloud cover removes the stars, and with them any sense of direction. The wind carries rain that is never heavy enough to stop for, but never light enough to ignore. There is no tree. There is no shelter. There is no sound beyond wind and the movement of water finding its way through channels you cannot see. The Swaledale Mountain Rescue Team logs callouts from this ground every year. A significant number occur after dark. Met Office records show cloud base below the higher ridges on roughly half the nights between October and March. Academic studies on spatial disorientation in featureless terrain confirm what walkers already know. Without visual reference points, the human brain cannot maintain a straight line. You drift. You circle. You convince yourself the ground ahead is rising when it is falling. Experienced fell walkers on UK hill walking describe a specific phenomenon on Yorkshire moors at night that has nothing supernatural about it and yet produces a response that feels as though it should. The conviction that the moor extends without limit in every direction, that you could walk for hours and arrive nowhere, that the landscape has absorbed you and is not especially concerned about giving you back. This is the real reason locals stay off these moors after dark. Not because of stories told in pubs or traditions handed down through centuries, because the land itself, in darkness and in weather and in silence, is sufficient. A contributor on a Dales walking forum, writing about a January crossing above Keld, said they had walked the Highlands, the lakes, and Snowdonia after dark. Yorkshire was the only place where the darkness felt like it knew they were there.